from the Centre for the Image and the BFI. This is the fourth session of Understanding Cinema, and tonight we're going to be looking at desire in space and what that means for characters and cameras. Please excuse me if my picture is a bit pixelated. I do apologise. Our internet signal here on Dervig is not very good. I live on the Isle of Mull and it's just a bit chonky tonight, so please excuse me if I turn into max headroom at any point and start looking quite strange. So the last week's session we looked at exercise 2 from the Understanding Cinema rules of the game, the L'Intervalle rules of the game from the Cinémathèque Française, and we looked at videos from that. Tonight we're going to look again at videos from exercise 3 this time, and this exercise is as follows. I'll just bring it up on my screen, please excuse me. Yes. Film the following scene in 3 different ways. 1, a static long take. 2, a moving long take. 3, using montage, cut and edit a sequence of shots together. The scene is as follows. Character A passes something to character B, which produces a tension between them, leading to their separation. The only thing that can change between the versions is the actors. Keep the same story and location. Keep all dialogue to minimum. The scene should last 1 to 2 minutes maximum. So, some folk music come up there. Sorry. So there, that's the challenge of that scene. That exercise has been done all across the world by various different groups, and tonight we're going to look at an exercise for Thames School in London. I believe they're called Thames, and this is from Mark Reed's blog, which you can find if you type into Google Mark Reed Cinemathèque. You'll find a blog there, and you'll find the footage there. So. That's 7:34. I think we're okay just to kind of start into things. I'm just going to take a mouthful of water, excuse me. So these exercises are fascinating, and they pose a question of what is dramatic, and that's something we're going to come back to again and again tonight. So if you're able to, if you can join on if you go to YouTube and you type in Thames School Cinémathèque exercise 1, you'll find it. I'm just going to put a link here onto the screen. Please excuse me if I'm yabbering a little bit. There we go. There we are. There's a link up there, and I'll put it onto the Google Hangout page as well if anyone's looking through the Google Hangout page. Here is exercise 1. If you want to check the Google Hangout page, that way you can see what's going on there. Right. So, Fraser and anyone else in the room, if you'd like to click over to the YouTube window, that's me going over right now, and it's exercise, and it says exercise 3 long take at the top. I'm just going to press it in a second. So that's the first of the exercise, a static long take. For me, Fraser, please feel free to contribute anything you want on the side here. You're very welcome to pop in anything there. For me, what was fascinating is the distance between the characters is the drama. There's this person just sitting, and then someone's placed, a human being is placed open-jawed beside them, and then moved closer to them. All the time the camera impassively looks on at a distance. I think that's quite an interesting thing in that the camera is like a bystander. It's not part of the action. It just feels kind of detached and is watching outside coldly. It's very strange, very cold, and very, very worrying. So we're looking out at the next one, and we'll maybe talk about that in comparison. The next one, I'm just going to copy and paste the link. The next one is just here. I'm pasting the link into the chat window, and I'll go back to Google Hangouts page, and here's the second window. Okay. And I'm going over to the YouTube channel right now. Sorry about that, I'm muted and unmute in Syndrome. The second one is a moving camera shot, and it's a slow push in. So that exact same strange, inhuman sequence we saw where someone was being kind of essentially passed on to someone else gets closer and closer in. The camera is no longer immediately an observer, it's almost taking part in the action, so it pulls in with it, getting closer and closer and closer. And for me, emotionally, the sensational response I have to that is pulling further and further and further away with horror. This kind of, oh! And what's fascinating about that is that tension in the space, this push-pull, notion of push-pull, this emotional getting physically getting closer, but emotionally pulling away. I think it's an extremely intelligent choice, really, really quite something. So that's purely down to distance in the simplest form. And that's the glory of these exercises now, that once they're beyond the technical of the first exercise, you start to see when there's creative expression in it, what can happen. And that was just a choice of essentially one camera move, just reframing, tracking in at the same time, pushing, 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 pushing in. Whereas with the same shot done with a moving long take, moving around in a different way, I don't think it would have been strong. This has got this definitive gaze, to quote Magazine, this kind of definitive gaze going to, and it's kind of horrid. It's absolutely, there's a sensational response. No two ways about it. I think, but you have to see the first exercise to get to know the context of it as well. But what also is very interesting is that the person who's off screen in the second exercise, you don't see them at all when the person's passed on to them. There's something really creepy about that person that speaks being off screen. Very, very odd. Okay, the third one is I'm going to put on over here. So this is the third one we're going to have a look at now. I'm going to put that into the menu here on the chat window, and I'm going to put it onto the Google Hangout page as well. Third video from Tez. And that's there, it's just going in. Third video is the edited version. So this is the version that's been cut and pasted and cut and copied, and montage has been used. So here we go. This is the going over the window now, okay, Fraser. And this is the third one. Oh, that's a peculiar thing, and it's extremely well made. I think it's an extremely fine piece of filmmaking. The Fraser, if you want to comment on anything, please feel free to comment at the side. If anyone else is watching, you're very welcome to comment on the YouTube page or the Google Hangout page, or indeed send me an email at alsach@gmail.com. I'll keep an eye on all those different things. But the editing of it, putting it together into an edit, makes it something else entirely. Again, the mindset of it is very different. There's we put directly into the action, and we follow it through in different ways, rather than the push in of the first one. Yes, yeah, I like the shot with all the three faces in the row. Fraser, I totally agree. Yeah, that's very nice. The choice of the shots is quite fantastic. Ah, excellent. Bonsoir, Mark. Good evening, Mark. How you doing?
Hello. Good evening.
Nice to have you on board. How you doing? Good. So what we've been doing at the present is, I'll just backtrack for a second, Fraser, if that's okay. Is we've been looking at the exercises from Thames School, and that's as found on your blog. And we've just talked about the first and then the second, and we just watched the third, and we're starting to identify what features there were within that. You can see there that Fraser says that he likes the shot with all the three faces in the row. I agree. There's a lovely kind of diagonal line almost through it that gives a sort of lovely sense of space that really is quite fascinating to look at. But for me, one of the very interesting things is the choice of camera angles, because they can change camera angle in between shots. There's a canted angle where it's off at the side, where you see the girl with the open mouth for the first time, who's really quite strange and creepy, like that. And that just, you get this sort of comic thing, but you also get the horror of the character being in there, which is quite remarkable. It really is great. Mark, do you know those clips quite well? The three. Yeah. What would you like to say about them? Is there anything particular that you'd like to say about them? Sorry to throw these straight into the fire.
There's something quite bizarre, I think, about their choice of scenario. So when they read the exercise that said an object has to be passed from one person to another, the fact that they chose a person as an object, I think was quite interesting and quite funny. And when we showed it in Paris, Natalie, who kind of compares the program, she said, "Oh, you English, you're always so zany in your humour. There's always such humour." But there's something that made a couple of us feel a little bit uncomfortable about the way that they chose, the way that they shot Elsa, with this kind of hangdog expression, and as a character who couldn't actually move, who didn't have any physical ability. And you could, I showed this to some primary school teachers, and they were a little bit nonplussed about it, and I think were also a bit discomforted. So it is an odd choice of scenario, and I never quite know how it goes down when I show it. Except that I remember when I was 14 or so, it's the kind of thing that I think my friends and I would have thought was funny, but it does look a little bit strange.
I think it's more than funny.
A bit discomforting.
I think there's an element of horror that goes with it. There's a definite sensational response, and that's what you want. There's a real kind of, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And Hannah is very brave. She reads like some sort of rag doll that's kind of left out. Doing with this open mouth rag doll. It's like, I don't want it. So there's a sketch by Chris Morris in his program Jam, which is quite similar, which is absolutely terrifying, of one person just being passed around. Oh, it's just terrifying stuff. So, but what the contrast between the choices of shots that they made really underpin the drama of that, and that's what tonight I was going to try and talk about, is this notion of space as drama, tension in the space being drama, and how that's interesting. And for me, I think the most affecting one, the third one is very, very well made, but the most affecting one is the second one, where it just gets slowly and closer and closer in, and it's almost this inevitable, and you can't get away from it. I think that's fantastic. That's real skilled use of distance.
The one thing I would say about that, that happened last year with this almost the same group of young people, was when they used a track and dolly for that sequence, and it's because the tutor, a guy called Marcus, who I think you'll remember, he thought that they really should have a go with putting a dolly on, which is a trolley, on a track, because you get such smooth and fluid movement, and when you move your camera in a very fluid way, immediately it raises your level of expectation about the shot. You think,
yes,
oh, these people are like, they're using professional style equipment, and the aesthetic is very different. It really raises it as it raises their game. They weren't really. They would always much rather use handheld, because they think it's a bit of a faff to build a track and put a dolly on it. But this time, they really wanted to explore the process of moving a camera closer to a scenario, to a dramatic scene, and you just feel as though you're moving into a different kind of arena when you have very fluid and fixed camera movement like that.
Yeah.
So and going closer and closer, and what they did kind of unconsciously was move the camera, then pause while there was some action happened, and then move the camera and then pause, and move the camera and pause. So it was as though it was that the camera was following the action.
Yeah, the breathing structure.
Yeah, that's right. It has a breathing structure. Yeah, it follows a series of beats, which they intuited. That's not from professional film grammar. That's not what a cinematographer would ever do. They'd never pause in a movement like that, because it draws your attention to the fact that it's moving.
Yeah.
So they made those choices, out of the situation.
Yeah.
Which makes it interesting.
To my mind, I think that's an extremely valid choice of movement. It's a really. I was having a discussion on Saturday with a group of other filmmakers we met in Glasgow about something, and we're talking about different approaches to learning film. And there's some beautiful, kind of very structured approaches that are really fantastic. And there's also the different way of. It's impulsive. There's an instinctive thing within filmmaking as well, and that people, we're all image native. Every single one of us now that's been alive since 1920 or whatever is image native. We know how images work. We're very immersed in the language of it. But the younger people now who have their phone has a camera in it, they can do anything all the time. They're confident of how to use images in a way that maybe all of our generations weren't previous to this moment in time, and that kind of instinctive kind of going with something with the breath, I think I don't mind that it pulls me out of the action and lets me know that there's a camera there, because that makes it even more horrible in some ways. Like it's just it's
I think that's it. That's really interesting. That there is something about how a language evolves when a group of language users become adept in it, and then start to try out the words and phrases in it, and they start to create new kinds of expression instead of always imitating what's being given to them. And that's you give them a resource and a bit of kit, and it turns out that they discover. I mean, another example, a similar kind of example, is that until iPhones and camera phones, you could never have portrait format video.
Yes.
All video formats were landscape,
yes.
But it's something that kids with phones or people with phones have now discovered, not deliberately, but that they shoot some portrait format video, and that's a major addition to the repertoire of cinema, but it's happened by accident.
Well, there's Xavier Dolan from Quebec. He has a film that came out last year called Mommy, which is extraordinary. It's one of the most affecting films I've ever seen. I would probably say one of my favourite films, actually, if I'm honest. And he, for the majority of the film, has it in Instagram ratio. one-to-one. It's this kind of
just right.
One-to-one, I believe it's that sort of square kind of shape, and the characters are confined in this viewpoint of just being looked at like that constantly, and you focus on the drama of the characters so strongly, so that when one character on a skateboard pulls the screen apart into 16:9 or whatever more formal ratio, you're suddenly like, oh god, the thing breathes. You really, really feel it. It's a totally brilliant sensation.
I've never seen it, but I should do. I will do.
Superb. It's out DVD next month. But when it comes back in, when the characters get pinned back into these horrible situations, we're back to the one-to-one ratio. And it's a masterpiece of filmmaking, which made me, this afternoon when I was doing some research on a number of different things, I watched a documentary, a 10-minute documentary on Dolan and his emerging style. Dolan's 25, 26 years old, has made 4 or 5 films, and won was it Un Certain Regard last year, did he win that?
Right.
With Godard.
Right.
Two of them won at Cannes. There was a young and old filmmaker won the prizes at Cannes, and it was extraordinary. But his style is very, very interesting in that a lot of the time the shots from the back of the back of people's heads, so that forces a distance with the character still holding on to something of themselves and giving you a bit of distance in the story, even though his films are so precisely about these people and these extraordinary relationships. By seeing the back of someone's head, and particularly in tracking shots or motion shots where they're moving around, it just keeps you that bit further away from them and gives them that bit of distance from you, the viewer, even though you're inside the guts of their life. He's a truly brilliant filmmaker. I really, really rate him. So there are other exercises, versions of Exercise 3 on Mark's website that are worth having a look at as well. There's one from Birkenhead School. Their take on it is, again, quite different as well, and that's the one in the corridor with mostly moving cameras. Very interesting about the passing of a key together. So it's worth having a look at, see how other people have interpreted this exercise. What, if you can say, Mark, what was the general feeling about it from France, Exercise 3? What did they say when all the partners met together to talk about the exercise and see it? What were their thoughts?
Right. That was a while ago.
Sorry.
Well, it's always useful when the work builds on previous themes. So incorporating static and moving long takes was something that people had a handle on, because we did an awful lot of static and long takes last year. So we were kind of prepared for using the long take, or for taking the long take a little to a slightly different place. So you have a long take, but you start to think about the spatial relations within the shot. So that was valuable. I think that you just build on previous themes and previous expertise. I don't know what else. Whether there's never quite a general feeling at these things. Is that there's just one kind of set of exercises after another.
Yeah.
I can't remember anything else that was no.
Were there any exercises from our colleagues in Barcelona that stood out at all? Because it seems that most years they have extraordinary work from Barcelona. Was there anything this year that particularly stood out at all?
As soon as you're asked to remember something, you can't. You forget absolutely everything. There are on the actual Cinematheque blog that there are. Let's see. There are some exercises from. I mean, there's actually one very affecting exercise which wasn't shown in Paris, but is on the blog, where the camera moves through a classroom with a classroom or corridor, and successively goes past groups of young people who just say "Je suis Charlie, je suis Charlie, je suis Charlie." So it got a bit of a political edge at that point. So that was powerful, but they didn't. That's on the website. They didn't show that at the
very interesting
at the training. Yeah. So that was. I like it when groups take on exercises and don't just do them as formal, kind of abstract things. That they situate them in a moment or a place, which is connected to now.
Yeah.
So that was very powerful. Yeah,
That's fantastic. Thank you.
there are some other Lincolnshire ones. I'm not sure whether I put them on the blog. There's one with a series of exercises with drumming around the drumming workshop, which was
Yep, that's on the blog.
Which was fun. That was who was that? That was Withen, I think. And then there's another really interesting one. Well, a couple of cameras moving through classrooms, around focusing on a set of interactions around the table, a classroom table, following a child through a room. Yeah, the Lincolnshire ones were really interesting this year.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are there on your blog. Certainly the drumming one was there. I'm just working in the background here as well to share up the next link. Moving on to the kind of more formal lecture side of things, Bergla used a couple of different clips from the work of Jean Vigo in the exercises in France when the training was on. And the first one we're going to look at is from L'Atalante. They're both, in fact, from L'Atalante. Jean Vigo was a French filmmaker who's a fascinating character, really different to the rest of his time, I think. And I had the conversation with someone saying, what has happened to French cinema since? Where's that kind of wild imagination and vibrancy gone? It is still there. That they're so proud of Jean Vigo, and rightly so. But there's a sort of anarchy, obviously, within his work that's I think brilliant. And his background is that he was, I think, consumptive. He had a terrible, terrible time. But his dad was an anarchist by the name of Almereda, which is an anagram of something fairly rude. So he was raised with these mad anarchists at the start of the century, and then he took to making film reflecting this. So his most famous film and best known film is a thing called Zéro de Conduite, which is Nil for Conduct, and it was remade, inspired more so, Lindsay Anderson's classic British film If, and there's a sense of joy and madness and joie de vivre, if you like, with the work of Jean Vigo. I think he's properly brilliant. I'm really quite a big fan. And so this is a clip from L'Atalante, and it's to do with the notion of space and changing contrast in space. So we find the central character here, the young gentleman who's getting into bed, is missing his girlfriend. He's just thinking of her, this woman that he's after, and she's thinking of him. And he's getting into his bed on this boat, L'Atalante, on the canal, and she's getting into her bed in her own house, and they're distant. But through the medium of cinema, they're brought together. And so we'll have a look at how that is. So if it's okay, I've clicked, put that onto the Google Plus page for anyone who's watching over there, and I'm just going to put that link up onto our chat menu here. And anyone who's in the room, if you're okay to click on over to the YouTube window, we'll see L'Atalante. Here we go. If you can give me a thumbs up if you can see it okay, Mark.
Hold on.
Oh. Okay, cool. There we go. So it just jumped back a little bit, and we're just going to watch it from this bit here. So there we go. There's a fairly fruity little scene. It's quite fascinating, I think. There's so much to talk about in it there. It's definitely it's very erotic. It's a love scene where they never make contact. It's extraordinary. Fraser, if you want to comment, please do feel free. Drop in anything you noticed from the clip there. What I think was remarkable is that there's that push-in again from the second exercise of that we saw from Thames. There's a push-in into her in bed. We're kind of getting closer in, and then there's this superimposition of the character over on top of the other as the cross and the dissolve into edit. I think it's rather beautiful. And quite fruity as well. I mean, you couldn't show that to a younger audience, but you get the idea that it's maybe to inspire something. And also, I don't know if you noticed that over the top of it, there was the light was the same. There was a sort of dotty, spotty kind of silk towel or something over the light, so they could had that in front there. Mark, is there anything you want to say at all about the clip? Your microphone's muted at the moment as well. Let's see. If you go to the top, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have I done it? Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that's you. Yep.
Well, what I love about it is that it's so rare to have that superimpose one image on another from two different places and make them and bring two separated people together. So Hollywood, I think, at the same time was doing lots of stuff with split screen. So you get, you get Cary Grant films in which he's on the phone in one half of the screen, and Carole Lombard or someone is on the phone on the other side of the screen, which is kind of conventional, but having something much more poetic in that two people coexisting in the same frame, who are physically separate, and the sense that it makes it much more physically sensuous, really, particularly when they're feeling each other up or feeling themselves up. But it is, isn't it? I mean, that is what it is.
It's quite fruity, yes, indeed.
That's what it is, and that's very unusual, particularly in mainstream cinema. And certainly, you just wouldn't get that in Hollywood cinema at the time.
Yeah.
It's all had to be done by suggestion. That's quite. It's just really, really daring, and it's something that only film can do. That only film can have two people who are physically separate actually put in the same place by virtue of the medium, in the same place and the same time. So it's not just that they're physically separate; it's that they are simultaneous. That's what superimposition does. It makes it makes it clear that they are in the same time, even though they're in a different place, and that's a very powerful thing that film can do.
And there's a fantastic shot within that where he kind of leans up and looks directly into the camera, and it's you get that
amazingly daring and formally imaginative and exciting and very, very rare. To have that kind of
the balls to do that, quite literally.
Absolutely.
So the next clip is it's from the same film, and it's about him looking for her again. And it's a very famous film. You've seen stills from this before. I'm sure anyone who's interested in film and looking around. There's a really quite a beautiful thing, and Bergala talks about it, the notion of cat and mouse between the figure and the filmmaker, this sort of chase. And so if we think about the location of where we are, we're on a little barge on the I think it's Canal Saint-Martin in Paris, and it's the canal that runs through Paris, where Hôtel du Nord is on there as well for those French film fans. It's just this grimy bit of Paris, and there's not much space in it at all, but yet someone goes missing. And so we have this chase for them, and then you have the scene with the captain underneath the. So I don't want to spoil it too much. So and like Fraser, if there's anything you want to say at all, please, as I say, do feel free to chip in at the side. So I'll just take a copy of the link before I take you across there, if that's all right. But you can see that sense of anarchy, that sense of daring within what he's doing. I think totally, it's quite remarkable. Hold on, this is going into the Google Hangout window as well. All right, okay. If you can make your way, please, over to YouTube, the YouTube window of the chat, that would be fantastic. And here it is. Oops. Sorry, it's gone back again. If that's okay, there we are. Mm. Okay, so there, come to the end. I just realised that the last time I saw a shot like that with two characters looking over the edge and one other behind is indeed Indiana Jones and the Raids of the Last Crusade, where I think he's gone off the cliff in the tank. So yeah, Spielberg's clearly inspired by Jean Vigo, I would say. But yes, there's so much in it. It's just mad, isn't it? There's just such a big a big thing to talk about. Again, we've got this superimposition going on. There's now a real distance between the characters, and that's reflected through the underwater bride, if you like. It's quite remarkable. And what, for me, is that it's what you touched on earlier on, Mark, is that it's using the film as a poetic medium, a medium of poetry, and by doing that, it makes it more emotionally real. There's a creative leap that's been made by the person that created that's an expression of their creativity and emotion. And I think as humans, we read that very, very, very clearly. I think that's that sort of metaphysical poetry. It's absolutely beautiful, absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm. So, just take going forward from the previous clip, where two people who are physically coexisting in the same time, but in separate spaces, are put in the same frame. This moves it on a bit, so that the girl, you don't actually know when she is at that point. But is she in his imagination, or is she dreaming herself, and that's a projection of her dream? So this isn't about two people really existing simultaneously. This is a projection of one, and a suspension of the other. They're both kind of suspended, aren't they?
And yes, then, definitely in the medium, yeah.
But what anchors the whole thing is that the music. I interpret that the music is what's being played on the gramophone.
Yep.
So the music puts us in real time, and then we're in a dream time, a dreamscape, and a weird underwater scape, all simultaneously. So being able
3 or 4 timelines running.
That's right. Yeah. So there's a real time, there's a dream time, there's imagined time, there's kind of fantasy projection. It's just an extraordinary. There's a density to it. I remember talking to somebody ages ago, a poet, about whether there was a similarity between film and poetry, and she said, if there is, it's in the density of the image, or the density of the shot, and the density of the line. That with a line of poetry, you can be in so many different places at once, and with a shot, you can be in so many different places at once. It's endlessly endlessly interpretable and discoverable. You can unpick it and unpeel those layers over and over again, and still find new things in there, new kind of modes in there. It's fantastically exciting, and it's just such a shame that it's not done more often. That people don't take the poetic approach to film more often, because they just want to get through they want to get through a scene, they want to get through an element in the story. But you could just spend a little bit more time, sometimes in a shot, in a space, in a moment, and explore it and feel it a bit more.
That's maybe our role, is to try and encourage that as teachers and working with groups and things like that, is to say, right, what is your impulse within working this camera? Look at something back. We can watch things back now. We don't have to wait to have them developed in the lab, but we can watch them back and look at it and say, right, that's good, that's effective, but how can you make it more poetic? How could you do that with a more imagination, and plant that even now and see what happens as those seeds grow and grow and grow. Fraser, if you're working with your group, see if you can do that again. So we plant the seeds of the literal, but also, which is fantastic, but then the poetic beyond that. And that brings us to Tony Zhao's clip of the week, which is about the work of Lynne Ramsay. And I'll put a link into that later on in the email that goes around after this. But Tony Zhao, his last video was on the work of Lynne Ramsay, and it was saying exactly that. It was the poetry in cinema, how we engage with the detail of a shot, and how that gives us poetic information, and how we relate to that in our imagination. I've always talk about this as kind of space in your head that you're trying to imagine. That if you see something, yeah, fair enough, but you want to create a 360-degree world around your head of what's going on in the world of the film. And off-screen space is such a great way to do that. Sound is a great way to do that. But also the potency of the image of what you're seeing, suggestion of just a tiny thing, opening things up. It's really, really quite a remarkable thing to do, and I know that's quite a vague thing to say, but Tony Zhao's video says it much better than I could. And yeah, it's that emotional reality through poetry, I think, is quite brilliant. So yeah, is there anything else you want to say about Atalanta before we move on to the next clip, Mark? Likewise, Fraser, if there's anything you want to say as well. Well, we talked about space and drama, the notion of drama and space, and there are certain perspectives which we mentioned before in these sessions of drama being defined almost by push and pull, the notion of tipping over and pulling away. I push myself, or I am pushed. What's the difference between that? I pull, or I am pulled. What's the difference between those different things? And these are internal forces very often within a character, within drama. So these clips we looked about there are about drawing people together, these breaking down space and getting together through the imagination, through the confines of a small boat, escaping into your imagination underneath the water and finding this joint space together, this pulling together. But what happens when, to use the magnetism example, someone is drawn to someone but at the same time repelled? There's some force repelling them that keeps them away from it, that keeps the drama happening by something internal that's there, and maybe the other person is completely oblivious to this. This is the field of melodrama. This melodrama being a very popular form of 19th century theatre. It started out as sort of at the same time as music hall stuff, people being overly sincere on stage and living their hearts out on stage, and the audience, that was at the time, that was very much what they were into, and it was a massively popular form. It's waxed and waned over the years, and you can argue that soaps nowadays are a very good representation of melodrama. But Clint Eastwood, in his film The Bridges of Madison County, went back to the melodramatic forms of the earlier years. What's the filmmaker he kind of references in it, Mark? I can't remember. There's someone he specifically references in trying to make that film. It's not Busby Berkeley, but it's I can't remember. Is it Howard Hawks or something like that?
Don't know.
There is a specific kind of filmmaker he tried to capture the mood of by doing this, and it's quite a long clip, and it's about 4 minutes long, but it's totally worth watching. Over on the Google Hangout page, you'll find there's a link there already. I'm just about to put the link up in here if anyone's in the room that can't access the YouTube list. If you want to head over to the YouTube thing, it's a clip, as I say, from Bridges of Madison County, and watch the iconography in this as well. See if you can spot any iconography.
I'm trying again.
Okay, that's enough of that. It's too much. It's so it was fantastic, but it's like, oh, it's so it's very, very heavy in how it does things. It's yeah, the rain, as you say, is just brilliant. That's a medium. That's something that's in between the characters. This constant drizzle, this there's something. It's not just atmospheric. It's separating them physically as well. And you can see she's just been out in the rain. He's out in the rain as well, and there's just so much. We talked about push-ins within even the second exercise there. The push-ins of the camera where it goes across the diagonal, and then to her it pushes into both of them. We have this very, very sessional response. It's fantastic. It's a really remarkable thing, and I think it's this desire inside the character of her wanting to get away and join this man and be with this man, but there's something forcing her back. Is it her faith, the crucifix hanging there? And I think there's something so fundamentally dramatic about this that I think the best way or one way to look at it is to think of what is drama. It's think of something really nice and then make it not happen. I think that's one way you can do it. It's just put obstacles in the way of something nice happening. A woman in an unhappy marriage meets a nice man. That that could be a really simple, lovely story. But no, she's. So as you say, yes, Mark's commented on the side here. It's the use of weather is not just colour or backdrop. It's crucial to the narrative. I think you're totally right. Would you like to say more about that, Mark?
Not about the weather particularly, because that was just prompted by what Fraser said.
Yeah, totally.
Which he's absolutely right. The rain is kind of part of the scene. It's not just the backdrop. Sometimes you get rain to make you feel a bit sad, and it isn't about that. It's actually it's a physical impediment, isn't it, between them? Now, when you were talking about pushing and pulling, you can actually see physical magnetism and its impact on Meryl Streep when she leans across the bench seats towards Eastwood, and then in the movement, and then she starts moving back, and you see why, and they cut on the movement. It's because her husband opens the door and comes into the seat at the same time. So you physically see her moving towards and then away. In exactly the way you're describing. So it's physically pushing and pulling, not just metaphorically, but actually physically. It's wonderful. In terms of physical gesture and movement, enacting attraction and the opposite of attraction, whatever that is. It's great.
Yeah, it's compulsion and repulsion. I don't know if it's
compulsion and repulsion. Yeah.
It's the interval is the drama in this. It's the space between them is the drama, and to make it, it starts off static. He's outside, she's in the car, and then they both get in cars, and the interval gets greater and then gets smaller, and there's that great moment at 3 minutes and 38 seconds where her hand goes down to the handle. She's about to get out. I mean, imagine you sat through all 2.5 hours of this movie. This is the last scene. You're like, come on,
go.
And she doesn't. I know. And she's back with that bloke from the X-Files. You're like, oh, that's a shame. It's really. It's just something so dramatic about it. It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Well, and if you think,
and what's also worth noticing are these.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. What's also worth noticing are these moments of pause. These kind of. That's part of the drama as well. Drama isn't kind of just, and then she did this, and then she did that, and then she did. It's lots of whoa there, and then these fulcrum moments of I'm about to fall, I fall, or I'm about to be pushed, I'm pushed.
If you think about pathos, trying to wring pathos out of the most banal moments, that the kind of heartbreak that there is in an indicator light, that it's that when he's blinking left, there's a stoplight, he's blinking left, he goes off left, and they don't follow. It's as you described, drama being think of something you want to happen and then stop it from happening. A car goes left, the other car goes straight on. It's a really simple but very powerful.
Brutal And that's life, you know. That is the brutality of life. What's the poetry within that scene of the last thing that I just before I paused it there is that the husband, as the car pulls off and goes that way, as they're going that way, he winds up the window to increase the distance between her and him, just one little bit more.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, my heart rate. Oh, it's remarkable. It really is. It's a film I do want to see. I've never seen the whole thing, but I think I will.
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago. There is something interesting about melodrama, which they're still critically kind of despised. I think, you know, in order to get film critics interested in melodrama, there's got to be an irony to it. There has to be a level of distance, but straightforwardly, emotionally punchy film, particularly about the love lives of middle-aged women. I think they're still critically despised. You don't get them written about in sight and sound. Nobody would ever say that Bridges of Madison County is a great film, but it is a great. It's a very emotionally very powerful film, and therefore great of its kind.
I think, and it's done sincerely as well. I think that's the thing about Eastwood is he's a very sincere filmmaker, and I disagree with his politics quite radically so. But I think I appreciate how sincerely he holds with them, and it's so the emotional narrative that he proposes within that seems to be something real and something that so many people can relate to. It's there's nothing blooming wrong with that, I tell you. So my hat goes off to Mr. Eastwood. Now I think we'll call it a night there. I just want to read the provocation for the final exercise. This is our 4th week. Next week is week 5, and that'll be. Well, you've been to Paris by week 6. You'll have been to Paris, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe we'll start to see if we can find some of the final films. If it's possible to share some final films across, Mark, that'd be fantastic. And we'll start to look at what they are and maybe look at them in a bit more depth as well. I'll maybe try and share them beforehand. But the provocation for the group film is as follows. Make a short film lasting 6 to 10 minutes which contains the following sequence. A character is drawn into a situation that makes them envious, involving 2 or 3 characters. They then distance themselves from the scene. They then meet another character. In the film audience's emotional response, the emotional response should be brought about by the visual and oral spacing, or intervals between the characters and between the characters and the camera, moving closer to each other, pulling away from each other, placing objects between the characters, placing objects between the camera and the characters. So that's the provocation. Next week we're going to look at desire and not just desire, jealousy and the invidia, they call it, this kind of wanting to get something, wanting to take something from somebody else, but you can't. It's fantastic. There are a number of interesting clips. And if you're looking at the YouTube playlist online afterwards, there's one clip that goes with tonight, which is Buster Keaton. That's tonight's silent comedy clip. Buster Keaton in the changing room from the cameraman, where the proximity is just so great between the two of them. It's quite extraordinary. So fantastic. Thank you, Mark. That's great. I'm reading that there on the side. So there are the films we can use for next week. And Lynn Ramsey's Gas Man, fantastic, which is on YouTube. I'll also put a link into that on the blog to follow, the chat to follow. So thank you very much for your time, Mark. That's great. Is there anything you want to say before we round off at all? Fraser, likewise, is there anything you want to say before we round off at all?
Thank you very much. No, it's great.
Thank you. Yeah. Lovely to see you all, and thank you very much, Cyberspace. Nice to see you, and we'll see you at the same time, same place next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.